U.S. Senator Jack Reed, thank you for joining us.
Ian, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Hundreds of people demonstrated outside of your Providence office on Saturday, calling on Rhode Island's federal delegation to do more to stand up to Elon Musk and his efforts to remake the federal government. Do you believe that the delegation is doing enough?
I think the delegation is working extraordinarily well. On my own sake, I led the effort to prevent Secretary Hegstead from being named Secretary of Defense for reasons that at least convinced several other Republicans to join us. The only time I've seen a real break in their ranks. And we sent a signal, I hope, to the president that his appointees, his nominees, can't be superficial. They have to be people of competence, character, experience. And Senator Whitehouse has been extremely diligent with respect to his role in nominations and other aspects, too. We're in a position right now where, based on our constitutional system, the courts are the best form of relief. The president arguably breaking the law in many cases, and as a result, it's the courts that must declare that and impose the proper sanction.
Your colleague from Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey, says the Trump administration is posing a constitutional crisis by usurping Congress's power to control federal spending. I wonder, looking ahead to the next 2 years before the next midterm elections, what's your best case, worst case scenario for the extent to which the Trump administration and Elon Musk might remake the federal government to the detriment of the U.S. from your perspective?
Well, the worst case is, frankly, creating such institutional turmoil that the government really can't function. And there is a theory that that's one of the goals of President Trump. He likes chaos. He thrives on it. And it allows him to be unchecked, which he likes, and also to make money, which he likes. So that's the case where this will not be focused really on reforming the government, and certainly not by abiding by the law, but more on self-aggrandizement and self-promotion. That would be terrible because it would lead, I think, to an aggregation of power in the White House that would be a constitutional threat. The positive side would be and there are places where we can be much more efficient in government. And if Musk would focus on those places and do it in a more targeted way, and frankly, when it came to laws, approach Congress with recommendations that we could take up, that would be a much more effective way to do it. One aspect of this, too, is this is being seen throughout the world. So America is being judged now not as a reliable, steady partner, but as this erratic function. One day you have USAID helping healthcare centers in a country. The next day they're gone. What does that say about the durability and the stability of the United States?
You pointed, Senator Reed, to your opposition to Pete Hegseth as defense secretary. Nonetheless, Vice President Vance cast the tie-breaking vote. And Politico last week had a piece entitled "The Week That Trump Broke the Senate." The argument was that caving Republican opposition to cabinet nominees who once would have been unthinkable, like Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy, and perhaps Pete Hegseth as well, shows how the importance and relevance of the Senate has been marginalized. What do you say to that?
Well, there is a very significant and real danger because our constitutional role is advice and consent. And frankly, my suspicion is that many of the people that voted for these individuals had no confidence in their ability to do the job. And as a result, the Senate, I think, stepped back from its constitutional role, and that's unfortunate. The closest we got was Hegseth. It's the second time, I believe, that a vice president ever had to vote a break of tie for a cabinet appointee. So we're trying our best, but there's a real danger here that my Republican colleagues will move away from their constitutional responsibilities and be more partisan and more committed to Trump. The other point I should make, which is very serious, is that a lot of their acquiescence was gained by intimidation, some of it blunt force, threatening primaries, threatening to put in $100 million against them in their primary campaigns. In fact, other threats to just try to ruin their careers and their lives. And these are the kind of tactics which Trump should be heavily sanctioned for. They're beyond the pale. And I'm hoping that at some point my Republican colleagues will grasp that and make the proper move.
You say the administration should be sanctioned, but it seems to be embracing the strategy once urged by Trump supporter Steve Bannon to flood the zone. In other words, to make so many initiatives that it overwhelms the ability of news media to follow it and of opponents to oppose it. Given how there's such a huge volume of stuff emanating from the Trump administration via executive orders and other means, how can Democrats effectively respond to that?
Well, you have to pick your shots, basically, and I think that's exactly what he's doing in terms of flooding the zone, of having every day a new issue. There's several reasons for that. One is to create this kind of turmoil that is very difficult to straighten out because every day there's a new crisis. Second, he loves to dominate the front pages, so every day he thinks of something else. Some of these thoughts are absolutely, taking Canada as the 51st state, doing things like that are more than bizarre. And it helps him in terms of just upsetting any type of opposition, because there's something new every day to oppose. This is Trump, I think, going way, way back. I mean, no one has battled more in courts, suing, countersuing, refusing to pay judgments, appealing the judgment. That's the way he's operated. And now he's literally unblocked because there are, unlike the first administration, no strong members of the Congress, Republicans, who will stand up and say no. John McCain's not there. Two, there's no one in the cabinet that has to stand up and say, hey, you can't do this, Mr. President, or my advice is not to do it. And so he is just freewheeling. Again, the courts will have to step up quickly, et cetera, but, speed is not one of their best features.
You call the courts a necessary backstop, but President Trump has filled out the Supreme Court and moved it in a conservative direction. What level of concern do you have that courts will prevent the worst excesses of the Trump administration?
Well, I think the lower courts are doing that right now, and it's people who've been appointed by Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. They just understand this is clearly against the law. When it gets up to the Supreme Court, there it gets to be a little more complicated because despite their admonition to everyone, we just interpret the Constitution, we just do it, et cetera, there always is, I think, other influences, philosophical or otherwise. And so when you get to the court, I think their concern is going to be not only what's the right thing to do, but will they be recognized and will that judgment be enforced by the president? And again, Trump's behavior is trying to send signals even to the court that, you have no power. I have all the power. That concerns me, and it should concern everyone.
The General Accounting Office estimates that there's between $233 billion and $521 billion in fraud from federal spending every year. Before Trump returned to the White House, it seemed like there was not much interest or motivation in Washington in addressing that fraud. Is there something to be said for the focus of Trump and Musk on trying to really go after fraud and federal spending?
Well, it's somewhat ironic. They are proposing to literally gut the IRS, and a great deal of that fraud comes through the income tax system. People not paying their taxes, and not the working people because it's deducted from your pay, but people who have high-level incomes and find incredibly complicated tax schemes, and yet he's going to take away all that money from the IRS to go out and enforce what is probably, in many respects, one of the major forms of lost revenue to the federal government or misspent revenue. So, this is not about cracking down on corruption. This is about cracking down on his political enemies or people he perceives as his enemies. It's also about trying to eliminate, in large part, the federal workforce, which for many, many years has served with great dedication and great diligence. I know the people at Electric Boat who were supervisors for the shipyards, also the people in Newport at the Naval Underwarfare Center. They've dedicated their lives. Many had better options but chose to serve their country. I don't think he appreciates that.
Did President Biden undercut Democrats' hopes of retaining the White House by waiting too long to relinquish his reelection campaign?
Well, I think he made a very courageous decision to step away. That's a tough decision. Had he done it earlier, we would have had a better opportunity to win. That's simple campaigns. The more days, more time. In fact, there might even have been a primary election process, which I think would have helped us in terms of getting the message out, getting several candidates, and then going forward better prepared. But ultimately, he made a very difficult choice for the country.
As we're hearing from you, Democrats take a very dim view of President Trump, but he did win a narrow victory in the popular vote, and he gained more support from a variety of demographics, working class voters, black voters, Latino voters, young people, etc. Democratic Party seems to have lost a lot of appeal among Americans. Why is that?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that we did not effectively communicate the successes we had. We had the Inflation Reduction Act. For the first time, we were able to battle with the big pharma companies, lower the price of insulin to $35, where before it was hundreds of dollars. That's helping people, starting to put serious drugs in a process of negotiation so their price will be capped by negotiating with the company. That is going to be a huge benefit to seniors and to everyone. And yet we didn't publicize that enough, I think. The infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan, helped revive our infrastructure, which all across the country has been lacking significant investment. In fact, one of the claims that Trump made in 2016 is he was going to pass $1 trillion infrastructure bill. He didn't. He passed a tax bill that was very, very helpful to the richest Americans. So I think we had to do a better job, and frankly, we didn't, to get those messages out, to connect it with working people.
If the Trump administration succeeds in eliminating or greatly curtailing agencies like USAID, in significantly downsizing the CIA, in replacing thousands of civil service employees with loyalists in the federal government, what will the cumulative effect be?
It will be a disaster. Let me just give you an example. Cutting off foreign aid. Right now, the Israelis and the Lebanese forces are trying to maintain the ceasefire in Lebanon. And we cut off all foreign assistance to Lebanon, which we should be actually putting more resources in there to stabilize that government, which for the first time is for a long time, a non-Hezbollah government. And that would hopefully maintain the ceasefire. In addition to that, Trump has said through his cabinet he's going to eliminate the Cybersecurity Commission in the Homeland Security Department. That's the agency that goes after disinformation, particularly from foreign countries like Russia and China and Iran. That's going to flood the airwaves with incredible disinformation that will confuse and conflict Americans. Then he's also stopped enforcing sanctions on Russia and their oligarchs. And that's sending a signal to Putin, hey, I'll help you, give me a face-saving deal in the Ukraine. So after a while, if you don't have an intelligence capacity, you can't anticipate what's going to happen. You can't react to what's happened. And in contrast, you can recall that when the Russians were invading Ukraine, we had the intelligence to warn the Ukrainians, to warn the world, to mobilize NATO almost immediately, and to effectively defeat the first prong of their attack, and then help Ukrainians as we've done so far. if we eliminate that intelligence capacity, we'll lose, frankly.
Senator Reid, as we sit here, you are 75 years young. Is there anything right now that would stop you from seeking re-election next year?
The only thing that would stop me would be a medical condition that would prevent me to faithfully fulfill my obligations to the people of Rhode Island. I'm working hard, as I always try to do. These are difficult times. I'm trying to do my best. In a way, too, I think leaving the scene at the moment of intense political instability might not be the best thing. But ultimately, my obligation is to the people of Rhode Island. If I couldn't physically carry on the job, I wouldn't ask for it.
You've known Gina Raimondo since you babysat for her when she was fresh on the scene, literally. As we look toward the next presidential election in 2028, she gets some mention as a prospective candidate. Where do you place her among the prospective Democratic candidates?
I think she would be a very credible candidate. One, she has great intelligence. Two, she is very determined and also extremely thoughtful and wants the best advice possible. She's not one of those people who thinks they're the smartest person in the room. Certainly I'm not. And I think she could also pull people from the center. She has a very good relationship with the business community. She has done a significant job with the Commerce Department. The CHIPS Act, many of those things were a result of her efforts. So she has lots going for her. She's a very talented person and a very honest and decent person, too.
U.S. Senator Chuck Reid, thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Thanks, Ian.